He seemed like the perfect man. Handsome, polite, confident. The kind of guy any woman would be lucky to bring home. But within 3 weeks of meeting him, both a mother and her daughter tested positive for HIV. And just like that, he vanished. No note, no message, no forwarding address, no trace. This story didn't begin in a courtroom or on the front page of a newspaper. It started in a quiet American suburb, inside a warm kitchen, during what should have been an ordinary family dinner. One man, two women, one horrifying secret. How did a charming stranger infect two women, mother and daughter, with a life-changing virus and disappear without a trace? Was it a cruel accident? A twisted revenge? Or something even darker? What if the betrayal didn't come from a stranger, but from the person you trusted the most? She thought she was falling in love. Her mother thought she was just being supportive. Neither of them imagined they were sharing the same man. Until one night. One terrible, unforgettable night. Everything unraveled. By the time the truth surfaced, it was too late. One body would never be found. One lie would destroy a family. And one secret would be buried deeper than any grave. This is not just a story of love gone wrong. This is a story of passion, guilt, betrayal, and the irreversible cost of silence. Are you ready to uncover what really happened behind closed doors? Let's begin. Her name was Emily, 26 years old, smart, driven, independent. She worked at a local marketing agency and spent her days building campaigns for small businesses. To most people, Emily seemed like she had it all together. But at night, the silence of her home reminded her of something missing. Love, connection, excitement. She still lived with her mother, not out of necessity, but out of choice. They were close, closer than most. Emily's father had passed away when she was just 11. A car accident. Sudden, brutal. It changed everything. Since then, it had been just the two of them. Her mother, Diane, had dedicated her entire life to raising her daughter. Diane was 56. Elegant, composed. She had once dreamed of becoming a writer. But life had other plans. She gave up her dreams when her husband died, choosing instead to focus on stability and survival. Diane worked as a high school librarian. She loved books. She loved quiet. But underneath that calm, controlled exterior was a woman who had not been touched, had not been truly seen, in nearly 15 years. Time had made her strong. It had also made her lonely. Emily and Diane shared everything. They laughed together, cried together, even binged the same crime documentaries late at night. Their bond was deep. But even deep bonds have cracks. The house they lived in was a cozy one-story in a quiet suburb. Trees lined the street. Neighbors waved politely. It was the kind of neighborhood where nothing bad ever happened. Until it did. The kitchen was Diane's favorite room. Always spotless. Always smelled of fresh coffee and cinnamon. Emily would come home from work, toss her keys on the counter, and talk about her day while Diane stirred soup or baked cornbread. They were more like best friends than mother and daughter. But even best friends keep secrets. In recent months, Emily had started dating again. Nothing serious at first. A few dates here and there. Then she met him. She never told Diane much about him in the beginning. Just that he was different. Charming. He had a deep voice, a slow smile, and a way of making her feel like the only woman in the world. His name was Alex. Or at least, that's what he said it was. Emily met him through a dating app. Their connection was instant. Within days, they were texting constantly. Late-night calls. Inside jokes. The kind of spark she hadn't felt in years. When she finally brought him up to Diane, her mother was happy. Hesitant, but happy. After all, she only wanted her daughter to be loved. Emily didn't notice it at first, but Diane asked a lot of questions. About where he worked, where he was from, what his intentions were. Not out of suspicion. At least, that's what Emily believed. But Diane was observing, listening, studying. And when Emily showed her a picture of him on her phone, Diane froze for a second too long. Not out of fear, but out of something she couldn't name. Curiosity? Nostalgia? Longing? Diane smiled and said he looked kind. Emily didn't see the way her mother's hands trembled slightly as she handed the phone back. She didn't see the way Diane stared out the window that night, long after Emily went to bed. And she definitely didn't know that the moment Alex entered their lives, something had shifted. A door had opened. Not just in their home, but in Diane's heart. Neither woman had any idea what was coming. Not the lies. Not the betrayal. Not the irreversible damage. Because sometimes, the most dangerous stranger is the one you invite in with open arms. Emily met him on a rainy Thursday evening. She had just finished a long meeting at work and decided to reward herself with a glass of wine at her favorite little bistro downtown. It was quiet, dim lighting, soft jazz playing from the speakers. The kind of place people went to be alone. That's when she saw him. He was sitting at the bar, nursing a scotch, dressed in a dark gray coat and black turtleneck. Clean-shaven, hair slicked back, a quiet confidence about him, like he didn't need to be noticed, but always was. Their eyes met, briefly, and then again. She looked away first. When the bartender came over, he smiled and gestured to her. "Let me get that for you," he said. His voice, low, smooth, deliberate. She smiled politely. "Thanks." And that's how it began. They talked for hours that night. About music, books, travel, life. He said his name was Alex. Alex Carter. He claimed to be in consulting. Something vague enough to sound impressive, but not too specific to raise suspicion. Emily didn't press. She was too caught up in how easy it felt, how naturally the conversation flowed, how warm her skin felt under his gaze. By the end of the night, he walked her to her car. No kiss, just a gentle touch on the arm. "I hope I see you again," he said. And she hoped so too. The next morning, he texted her, "Good morning, beautiful." From there, things moved quickly. They had dinner the next night, then brunch that weekend, walks in the park, midnight talks that turned into dawn. He was attentive, present, and most of all, interested. He asked about her childhood, her dreams, her favorite smells. He listened like every word mattered. Emily was used to men who stared at their phones, who talked about themselves, who made her feel invisible. But Alex made her feel like the most important person in the room. By week 2, she was hooked. He brought her flowers. Not roses, but wildflowers, sunflowers, baby's breath, and daisies. She once mentioned her father used to pick them on walks. He remembered. Little details like that made her believe this was something real, something lasting. She told Diane about him after their third date. Her mother raised an eyebrow, not out of disapproval, but mild surprise. "So soon?" Emily laughed. "I know, but he's different, Mom." Diane nodded slowly. "Different how?" "I don't know," Emily said, playing with her spoon. "He listens. He looks at me like I matter." Diane smiled gently, but her eyes were searching. "I just want you to be careful." "I am," Emily promised. "But I also want to be happy." For the next few weeks, Emily floated. She had someone to text good morning, someone to call after a bad day, someone to make her laugh when the world felt heavy. They started spending more time at her house, watching movies, cooking together, falling asleep on the couch. Diane would retreat to her room early, giving them space. But she was always listening. She heard the laughter, the whispers, the footsteps down the hall. And while part of her was happy for her daughter, another part, buried deep, felt something else. Jealousy? No. Loneliness. One night, as Diane folded laundry in her room, she heard Emily giggling in the kitchen. Alex's voice followed. Low, playful, then silence, then footsteps, then the sound of a kiss. She stopped folding. Her hands froze over a towel. Her throat tightened. She shook it off, told herself it was normal, that Emily was a grown woman, that this was what she wanted for her. Still, the silence that followed felt louder than ever. 2 nights later, Alex brought takeout over. Emily was running late from work, so Diane opened the door. They hadn't been alone together before. He stood there with a brown paper bag and that same confident smile. "Evening, Diane," he said. She blinked. "You remembered my name." "Of course," he replied. "Hard to forget someone with your eyes." She flushed. "Well, come in. Emily should be back soon." They sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where she had raised her daughter. Made birthday cakes. Healed skin knees. Sat up during thunderstorms. Now she sat across from a man half her age. A man who looked at her a second too long, who smiled a second too slowly. They talked. About food. About movies. About nothing at all. But the way he spoke, the way his eyes moved, it stirred something in her she hadn't felt in years. A woman forgotten can still feel. When Emily walked in, they both jumped slightly. But she didn't notice. She ran to him, kissed his cheek, and took the food to the counter. They ate together that night. All 3 of them. Laughed. Drank wine. Told stories. It should have felt wholesome. Comforting. But something in the air had shifted. Later that night, Diane stood by the sink, rinsing dishes. She watched through the reflection in the window as Alex wrapped his arms around Emily. But his eyes, they weren't on Emily. They were on Diane. And for the first time in her life, Diane didn't look away. The moment passed. He blinked, smiled at Emily, whispered something in her ear. But Diane couldn't unsee it. She went to bed early that night, laid in the dark. And for the first time in years, her heart beat fast. Something dangerous had entered their home, and neither of them had any idea just how much damage it would cause. It was a Saturday evening when Emily decided to host a real dinner. Not takeout, not leftovers. A proper meal. She wanted to do something nice, something special. She'd spent the whole afternoon preparing. Roasted chicken with garlic and rosemary, mashed potatoes, a bottle of wine she'd been saving for a someday occasion. And tonight felt like that occasion. Diane had helped set the table, pulled out the cloth napkins, lit a few candles. She didn't say it, but she appreciated the effort. She hadn't seen her daughter this excited in years. At 6:30, the doorbell rang. Emily rushed to answer. Alex stepped inside, holding a bouquet of fresh flowers and a bottle of red wine. For the chef, he smiled, handing the flowers to Emily. And for the hostess, he said, turning to Diane with the wine. Diane accepted it with a nod. You're very thoughtful. Emily beamed. Come on, let's eat before it gets cold. They sat around the table, candles flickering, the room glowing with warmth. Conversation flowed easily. Emily told stories from work. Alex chimed in with jokes and playful teasing. Diane mostly listened, but she smiled, laughed in the right places, sipped her wine slowly. There was something surreal about it all. For a moment, she could pretend this was a normal night, that she was a normal woman, that the man sitting across from her hadn't looked at her with something deeper than politeness. As the meal went on, the wine loosened everyone's edges. Alex poured Diane a second glass, then a third. Emily didn't notice. She was too busy trying to get the mashed potatoes just right. Diane hadn't planned on drinking much, but the wine was good, the conversation easy, and Alex was charming. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Emily put on a playlist. Low, jazzy music filled the space. They sank into the couch. Emily curled up next to Alex, her head resting on his shoulder. Diane sat in the armchair across from them, nursing the last of her wine. She watched them. They looked happy. She should have felt content, relieved, even proud. But all she could feel was a strange ache in her chest. Not jealousy. She kept telling herself that. Not envy either. It was something more complicated. A longing for something she once had. Or maybe something she never did. She stood up. I'll clean the kitchen, she said softly. No, Mom, don't, Emily said. You cooked. I'll do it. But Diane waved her off. It helps me unwind. She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving the two of them alone. From the sink, she could still hear them. Emily laughing. Alex whispering something. The soft creak of the couch as they shifted. She filled the sink with hot water. Began scrubbing the plates slowly. Methodically. Behind her, the voices faded. Then silence. Too much silence. She turned off the water. Listened. A soft thump. A low moan. She froze. It wasn't her business. She told herself that. They were adults. But her feet moved anyway. She stepped quietly to the doorway, just enough to see through the reflection of the window. Emily was lying on the couch. Alex was on top of her. They weren't being discreet. Diane's heart pounded. She should have turned away. But she didn't. Instead, she stood there. Watched. Her breath shallow. Her pulse quick. She didn't know how long she stayed like that. Seconds. Minutes. Time bent strangely in moments like these. When she finally looked away, her face was flushed. Not just from embarrassment, but something darker. Something that had been buried for years. Desire. She went back to the sink. Ran the cold water. But nothing could cool what she felt. Half an hour later, Emily excused herself to the bathroom. Alex walked into the kitchen, stretching. He smiled when he saw Diane. Need help drying? She shook her head. I've got it. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You're a good mother. She paused. I try. She's lucky to have you, he added. Diane placed a plate in the drying rack. We've always been close. I can see that. There was a pause. Too long to be casual. He stepped closer. Close enough for her to smell his cologne. It was subtle, warm, masculine. Diane's hands trembled slightly. She set down the sponge. You should probably go back to her, she whispered. I will, he said. Eventually, their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them. And then, a single step. He was in front of her now. His hand grazed her wrist. She didn't pull away. Neither spoke. The silence was thick, dangerous, electric. When his lips brushed hers, she gasped. But she didn't move. Not forward. Not back. He kissed her again. This time, deeper. She let it happen. For a moment, she wasn't Diane the mother. She was Diane the woman. Wanting. Craving. Alive. Her hands clutched his shoulders. She knew it was wrong. She knew it would destroy everything. But in that instant, nothing else existed. The kitchen, the candles, the night, and the man she should have never touched. They moved fast. Too fast. Pressed against the counter. Breaths heavy. Movements frantic. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't romantic. It was hunger. Desperation. Loneliness exploding into something physical. The sound of the faucet still running in the background. The clink of a spoon hitting the floor. And then, a noise. From the hallway. A door creaked. Footsteps. Soft. Bare. Emily. Diane froze. Alex stepped back. Too late. Emily stood at the edge of the kitchen. Eyes wide. Mouth slightly open. She didn't say a word. Just stared. At them. At her mother. At the man she thought she loved. Diane opened her mouth to explain. But nothing came out. Alex turned to say something. But Emily raised a hand. Don't, she said. Her voice was low. Empty. Broken. She backed away slowly. Then turned. And disappeared down the hallway. Leaving behind a silence thicker than any scream. And two people too ashamed to move. It was a dinner meant to bring them closer. But it shattered everything. From that night on, nothing would ever be the same. Emily sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. Her breath came in shallow, uneven waves. The scene she had just witnessed played on repeat inside her head. Her mother, Alex, in the kitchen, touching, kissing. It didn't make sense. She had only gone to the bathroom. Barely a minute. Maybe two. She wasn't supposed to see that. No one was. She pressed her hands against her eyes, trying to erase the image. But it wouldn't leave. The sound of Alex's voice. The look in Diane's eyes. Not fear. Not surprise. Something else. Willingness. Emily stood up suddenly. Her legs felt heavy. Her skin flushed. She grabbed her phone, then stopped. What was she going to do? Text a friend? Call someone? What would she even say? Hey, guess what? My boyfriend made out with my mother in the kitchen while I was in the bathroom. No, she couldn't say it out loud. Because if she did, it would become real. And real meant irreversible. She paced the room, back and forth, her heart thudding in her chest. The hallway light flickered under her door. She heard footsteps. Quiet. Hesitant. A soft knock. Emily. It was her mother. Emily didn't answer. Sweetheart, can I come in? Her voice sounded strained, like someone holding back tears. Or guilt. Emily stared at the door, jaw clenched. Another knock. Please. Still, no answer. After a moment, the footsteps retreated. The hallway went quiet again. She waited a full minute, then slowly turned the knob and opened the door. The hallway was empty, but the kitchen light was still on. She walked toward it, her bare feet barely making a sound against the floor. Diane was gone, but Alex was still there, sitting at the table, calm, almost relaxed. He looked up and smiled. Hey, he said, like nothing had happened. Emily didn't speak. He stood, slowly. Look, I know what you think you saw, but... She raised her hand. Don't, she said quietly. He stopped. Her voice shook, but her eyes were steady. I want the truth. He took a breath. Emily. The truth, she repeated, louder now. He looked down at the floor, hands in his pockets. It was a mistake, he said finally. I had too much wine. Your mom, she was lonely. We both were. Emily's stomach turned. So you thought you'd fix that with a kiss? He didn't answer. She took a step closer. Did you plan this? What? No. Did you come into our lives just to ruin us? Emily, please, he said, reaching out. She stepped back. Her foot knocked something on the floor. A small leather wallet. Alex's. It must have fallen out of his coat. She bent down and picked it up. I didn't mean, he started. But she wasn't listening. Her fingers rifled through the contents, almost without thinking. Cash. ID. A folded receipt. And then, a piece of paper. Folded carefully. Hidden behind a credit card. She pulled it out. Unfolded it. It was a medical report. Dated 3 weeks ago. Her eyes scanned the page. HIV positive. She stopped breathing. The room spun. She looked up at him. What is this? Alex froze. I asked you a question. He didn't answer. She took a step forward. You knew? He nodded, slowly. regret flickering in his eyes. You knew, she whispered again. Her throat closed. Her hands trembled. You slept with me. With her. And you never said a word. I didn't want to lose you, he said, almost pleading. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was wrong. I didn't feel sick. She slapped him. Hard. The sound echoed through the kitchen. He staggered back, clutching his cheek. How dare you? She said through gritted teeth. How could you do this to us? It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he mumbled. Wasn't supposed to, she repeated, her voice rising. You infected me. You infected my mother. He said nothing. She stared at him, eyes wide, chest heaving. Then she turned and ran down the hallway. Diane was in her bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, hands in her lap. Emily burst in. Did you know? She asked. Diane looked up, startled. What? Did you know about him? That he's sick. Diane's face went pale. What are you talking about? Emily threw the paper at her. Diane caught it, unfolded it, read the words. Her face crumbled. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. You didn't use protection, Emily whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Diane shook her head slowly. Emily's knees buckled. She slid down the wall, hands gripping her hair. Diane tried to reach for her. Emily, I didn't know. I swear. Don't touch me. Emily screamed. They sat in silence. One curled on the floor, the other frozen in shame. Then a noise. Footsteps. Alex. He stepped into the doorway. I think I should go, he said quietly. Neither woman moved. He turned to leave, but something inside Emily snapped. No, she said. He stopped. She stood slowly. Her eyes were blank. You don't get to just walk away. Emily. She picked up the wine bottle from the nightstand. Not to drink. To swing. It shattered against his shoulder. He shouted, stumbling backward. Blood trickled down his arm. Diane screamed. Emily, stop. But Emily wasn't done. She charged forward. Years of pain, betrayal, anger, all of it exploded at once. She shoved him hard. He fell into the wall. Diane rushed to pull her back. But something else happened. In the chaos, Alex lunged forward, grabbing Diane. Emily grabbed the lamp. Swung. It hit his temple with a sickening thud. He dropped. Still. Diane gasped, covered her mouth. Emily stood over him, chest rising and falling. Blood pooled around his head. Silence. Then a single sound. The ticking of the hallway clock. Neither spoke. Emily knelt down, felt his neck. No pulse. He's dead, she whispered. Diane dropped to the floor. Oh my God. Oh my God. Emily stood, her hands shaking. They looked at each other, then at the body. And just like that, the betrayal was no longer just emotional. It was criminal and irreversible. The room was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses in on your skin, that crawls into your ears and makes your pulse louder than your thoughts. Alex lay motionless on the floor, his eyes slightly open, his mouth parted. A thin line of blood curled along the corner of his lips. Emily stared at him, still holding the broken lamp base in her hand, her breath ragged, her knuckles white. Diane crouched next to the body, her face pale and full of horror. This can't be happening, she whispered. Emily dropped the lamp. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. Her hands were shaking, her mind spinning. She backed up until she hit the wall and slid down to the floor. He's dead, she said again. We killed him. Diane looked at her daughter. It was an accident. Emily laughed once, dry and bitter. You think they're going to care about that? You think anyone will believe we just snapped? She buried her face in her hands. Diane stood up slowly, wiped her eyes. We have to think. We have to stay calm. Calm. Emily snapped. There is a dead man in our hallway, Mom. They sat in silence for what felt like hours, though it was only minutes. Outside, the wind picked up. A tree branch scratched against the window pane. The world went on like nothing had happened. But inside that house, everything had changed. Diane finally spoke. No one knows he was here tonight. We could make this go away. Emily looked up. What are you saying? I'm saying if we call the police, our lives are over. Yours. Mine. Everything. Emily stared at her mother, shocked. I didn't think you had it in you, she said. Diane didn't respond. She just walked down the hallway and returned with a blanket. She knelt beside Alex, wrapped his body carefully, then looked up. Help me. Emily hesitated. Her heart told her to scream, to run, to confess. But something else, something colder, told her it was too late for that. So she nodded. Together, they dragged his body out the back door. The night was cold. The moon hid behind clouds. The backyard backed up to a wooded area. A small trail ran behind the house, leading to a clearing that no one ever visited. They had played there when Emily was a child. Now, it would become something else. They dug with garden tools, with their hands, with anything they could find. It took hours. Their fingers bled. Their backs ached. But they didn't stop. By the time they finished, the sky was starting to lighten. They lowered his body into the hole, covered it with dirt, leaves, branches. Not a ceremony. Not a goodbye. Just silence. Just fear. When they got back to the house, they cleaned. Every surface. Every drop. They washed the blankets. The dishes. The blood from their hands. They burned the medical paper. They threw away the wine bottle. They cleaned until there was nothing left of him. Except the memory. And the guilt. Days passed. Then a week. No police. No questions. No missing posters. It was like he had never existed. But Emily couldn't sleep. She barely ate. The silence inside her was louder than ever. Diane returned to her routine. Work. Books. Smiles for the neighbors. But something had changed. They didn't talk about it. Not directly. But it lived in the space between them. In the way they avoided each other's eyes. In the way Emily jumped at the sound of the doorbell. Then one day, Emily couldn't take it anymore. She made an appointment. At the clinic. Just to be sure. The waiting room was too bright. Too clean. The nurse smiled too much. The doctor's voice was too soft. When he said the words, she didn't hear them at first. Your test came back positive. She blinked. What? HIV positive. He kept talking. About treatment. About options. About next steps. But all she heard was buzzing. She walked out of the clinic into the sunlight and couldn't feel the warmth. Her body felt foreign. Her breath came in short gasps. She had thought the worst was over. But it wasn't. It was just beginning. She didn't go home right away. She drove aimlessly for hours. Ended up parked outside the beach. Stared at the waves. And cried. That night, when she got home, Diane was in the kitchen. Cooking like nothing had changed. Emily walked in. Dropped her bag. And said, I have it. Diane turned. What? I have it, Mom. Diane's eyes widened. What do you mean? HIV, Emily whispered. He gave it to me. Diane dropped the spoon. It clattered against the counter. She staggered backward, one hand gripping the edge of the sink. No, she said. No. I want to get tested, Emily said, voice flat. I needed to know. Now I do. Diane was shaking. She turned and walked to her bedroom. Emily followed. Diane rummaged through her drawer, pulled out a test kit, sat down at the vanity, hands trembling. Minutes passed in silence. The result appeared. Positive. She dropped the test stick, stared at her reflection. 2 women. 1 man. 1 virus. Emily sat on the bed. Their eyes met in the mirror, and something inside them cracked. Tears. Not just for the sickness. Not just for the betrayal. But for the lie they were now trapped in. We have to live with this, Emily said. Diane nodded. No one can know, she whispered. They won't, Emily replied. But we will. And that was the cruelest truth of all. Some secrets stay buried. But guilt? It digs its way back to the surface. Every single day. Emily didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed with her eyes open, staring at the ceiling, the moonlight casting pale shadows across her face. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face. Alex. Smiling. Lying. Touching her mother. And now, gone. But not really. Because he was still in her blood. She could feel him. Like poison. A slow, quiet death moving through her veins. In the morning, she got up and walked to the bathroom. Her face looked older. Hollow. She barely recognized herself. When she walked into the kitchen, Diane was already there. She had made coffee. Toast. As if it were just another day. Emily sat down. Neither of them spoke. They hadn't spoken much in days. Not since the test. Not since the truth. The silence stretched long and thin between them. Finally, Diane spoke. I think we should move. Emily looked up. What? Sell the house. Start over somewhere else. Somewhere far. Emily shook her head. We can't outrun this. Diane stared at her coffee. I know. But maybe we can try. Emily stood abruptly. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. I need air. She grabbed her coat and left. Outside, the sky was gray, heavy with clouds. She walked without thinking. Past the grocery store. Past the bus stop. Her feet led her to the place they never talked about. The woods. The clearing. Where they had buried him. She stood at the edge of the trail, heart pounding. The wind rustled the trees. The ground beneath her was cold and still. She stepped into the brush, each footfall a memory. When she reached the spot, she stopped. There was no marker, no sign, but she knew. She could feel it. Something wrong in the air. She dropped to her knees, pressed her hand to the dirt. It was cold, damp. She closed her eyes, whispered why. Not to the ground, not to Alex, but to the universe, to herself, to the part of her that still hadn't accepted it. Suddenly, she heard a branch snap behind her. She turned. Diane. Her mother stood there, wrapped in a coat, her eyes rimmed red. I followed you, she said softly. Emily stood up. They stared at each other. Two women, two graves, one above the ground, one below. I come here sometimes, Diane admitted. Why? Emily asked. I don't know, she said. To remind myself it happened, that it's not just a nightmare. Emily nodded slowly. Diane stepped closer, her voice lowered. I think we need to tell someone. Emily froze. No, she said. We can't live like this forever. We don't have a choice, Emily said. Diane looked away. Tears welled in her eyes. I see him every night. In my dreams. In the hallway. In the kitchen. Emily's jaw clenched. I don't dream about him, she said. I feel him. In my body. That's worse. Diane's voice cracked. I didn't mean for this to happen. But it did, Emily snapped. Because of you. Because you couldn't control yourself. Diane stepped back. Emily's words hit like a slap. You let him touch you. You let him lie to you. I didn't know, Diane whispered. You wanted him, Emily shouted. You were supposed to protect me. The air between them turned sharp. Diane's face twisted. Don't act like you didn't love the attention, she fired back. You threw yourself at him from the moment he walked in that door. Emily's hands balled into fists. I trusted you. I trusted you too, Diane said, voice trembling. And now the days that followed felt unreal. Time moved, but it didn't feel like it. Emily woke up each morning feeling like she hadn't slept. Diane went through the motions, showering, dressing, cooking, yet her eyes remained blank, unfocused. They barely spoke. When they did, it was short, mechanical, like two strangers trapped in the same house. The silence was worse than screaming, worse than crying, because at least those things meant you were still human. This silence felt like drowning, and underneath it all, rage simmered. It started slow, quiet, a spark buried under guilt and fear. But it grew. Each time Emily looked at her reflection, each time Diane clutched her stomach in the night and shook from sobs she wouldn't release. The rage grew teeth, and then one morning, it finally bared them. Emily was in the kitchen, staring blankly at her phone. She had Googled it again. Symptoms, stages, life expectancy. She scrolled mindlessly, not absorbing any of it. Then she saw a photo, a headline. Local woman's boyfriend missing after sudden disappearance. There he was, Alex. The same smirk, the same lazy charm in his eyes. Someone had reported him missing. A friend, not a relative, not a coworker, just a friend. Emily clicked on the article. They mentioned his car being abandoned near the park. They didn't mention the address. Not their house. Not their names. Not yet. Diane walked into the room holding a stack of laundry. She paused when she saw Emily's face. What is it? Emily turned the phone around. Diane's face drained of color. He's a headline now, Emily whispered. Diane walked to the table and sat down slowly. They don't know anything. Not yet. Emily set the phone down. I can't stop thinking about him. Lying in the ground. Alone. Diane said nothing. Emily stood. Started pacing. All we wanted was love. Connection. Something to fill the hole in our lives. She looked at her mother. And he used that. Used us. Diane's voice cracked. We let him in. Emily slammed her hand on the table. He made us sick. Diane jumped. Emily's breath came faster. Her voice trembled. I wake up every day with this thing inside me. And he gave it to me without warning. Without care. She clenched her fists. I didn't ask for this. I didn't deserve this. She turned on her mother. And neither did you. Diane stared at her, wide-eyed. Something shifted in that moment. For the first time since the night it happened, they weren't avoiding it. They were standing in it. Together. The rage wasn't between them. It was aimed outward. At him. At the man who had infected them both and smiled while doing it. Emily walked to the cabinet. Opened the drawer. Pulled out the piece of paper they hadn't burned. The copy of his medical result. She held it up. This right here is proof. Proof that he came into our home with poison in his blood. Diane looked at it like it was a weapon. Emily dropped it on the table. I keep wondering, what if we hadn't found that paper? Diane shook her head. We would have forgiven him. We would have gone on loving him, Emily whispered. And he would have kept destroying us. They sat in silence, the paper between them like a curse. Then Diane said something unexpected. Do you think he planned it? Emily blinked. What? To infect us? On purpose? Emily stared. It was a horrifying thought. But once spoken, it took root. What kind of man does that? Diane asked. Emily didn't have an answer. But something inside her cracked open. A fresh wave of fury surged through her chest. She stood again, started pacing faster. He didn't just lie. He stole our lives. Our peace. Our future. She picked up the paper, ripped it in half. Then again. Then again. The pieces fluttered to the floor like snow. Diane watched her, breathing hard. And then, something changed. Emily walked to the closet, opened the door, pulled out a box. Inside were Alex's things. The ones they hadn't thrown out. His hoodie, his watch, his cologne. She dumped it on the floor. Diane stood. What are you doing? Erasing him. Emily grabbed the hoodie, threw it into the sink, poured lighter fluid over it. Diane grabbed a match. Together, they struck it. The flame caught quickly, rose high, filled the room with heat. They watched it burn. Neither spoke. Neither flinched. The fire alarm screeched above them, but neither moved to stop it. When the flames died, only ashes remained. Emily turned to Diane, her voice low. I want to move on. Diane nodded. We will. But they both knew that wasn't true. Not really. You don't move on from a secret like this. You bury it, and hope it doesn't come crawling back. Emily walked to the window, looked out into the yard, the woods beyond. She could almost see the spot, where they put him, where the lie lived. I still see him in my dreams, she said softly. Diane stood behind her. I hear his voice, she whispered. Every time I close my eyes. They stood there for a long time. Two women, two victims, two killers, bound by blood, by silence, by the rage that exploded and left a body behind. And no matter how much they tried to forget, the fire in their hearts was one that no water could ever put out. The clock in the living room read 2:14 a.m. Everything was still, the kind of stillness that only follows something unspeakable. Emily stood over the body. Alex's face was pale now, wax-like. The blood on the carpet had begun to dry, forming a dark halo around his head. Diane stood frozen near the doorway, her hands clasped tightly, knuckles white. Neither of them said a word for a long time, just stared, until Emily finally spoke. We can't call anyone. Diane didn't move. No, they wouldn't believe us. They wouldn't care that we were scared, or angry, or sick. Her voice cracked on the last word. Diane swallowed hard. We're not just covering up a crime. Emily looked at her. We're protecting what's left of our lives. The words hung heavy in the air. Then Diane moved. She stepped forward, slowly, like someone learning how to walk again. We need to wrap him up. Carry him out, before it gets light. Emily nodded. They found an old plastic tarp in the garage. It smelled like mildew and dust. They laid it out on the floor next to him. Diane grabbed his arms. Emily grabbed his legs. He was heavier than they expected. His limbs limp. Awkward. The way only dead weight moves. They grunted. Strained. Inch by inch, they rolled him onto the tarp. Then they wrapped it around him tight, like a package no one should ever open. Emily ran to the hall closet and pulled out duct tape. They sealed every corner. Tight. Clean. It looked wrong. Even before they moved him, it looked like something out of a nightmare. But it was real. Diane opened the back door. The night was cold, air sharp like glass. They didn't speak as they dragged the bundle across the lawn. The grass brushed against their ankles. Wet. Icy. The trees loomed above them, silent witnesses. The trail behind their house was narrow, overgrown. Emily had played there as a kid, built forts, made up stories. Now she walked it carrying death. Halfway down, they paused, breathing heavy. Emily wiped sweat from her forehead, even though it was freezing. Diane pointed toward a clearing. There. They pulled him into the trees. Thick branches clawed at their arms. Thorns scraped their skin. But they kept going. When they reached the spot, Emily dropped her end, collapsed onto the cold ground. Diane stood over her, panting. We dig. Emily shook her head. With what? Diane didn't answer. She turned and disappeared into the dark. Came back with 2 shovels. From the shed, They started to dig. It was slow, painful. The ground was hard, packed with years of roots and stones. Their hands blistered, muscles burned, but neither stopped. Every strike of the shovel felt like penance. For letting him in, for falling for the lie, for everything. After what felt like forever, the hole was finally deep enough. They stood over it, breath visible in the night air. Emily looked down at the tarp, at the shape beneath it. She wanted to feel closure, but she didn't. Only nausea and fear. Diane knelt beside the bundle. She whispered something. A prayer, maybe, or just words to fill the void. Then, together, they pushed him in. The body hit the bottom with a dull thud. It sounded too final, like a door slamming shut. They started covering him. Dirt, rocks, branches, layer by layer, until nothing was left. No sign of him. No sign of what they'd done. They stood in silence for a long time, then turned and walked back. Not speaking, not crying, just walking, like ghosts. Back at the house, they peeled off their clothes. Mud-covered, blood-speckled. They dumped everything into trash bags, double-bagged, then shoved them into the outside bin. Tomorrow, Diane would drive them to the dump. Say it was yard waste. No one would ask. They scrubbed the floor, every inch. The blood came up slowly, but it came up. The lamp was gone, shattered, burned in the fireplace. The scent of smoke still lingered. By the time they finished, the sky was turning gray, dawn creeping over the horizon. Emily collapsed on the couch. Diane sank into the chair across from her. Their eyes met. No words, just the knowing, the weight of the secret settling in. This never happened, Diane said finally. Emily nodded. They slept for 3 hours, then woke up, washed their faces, made coffee, like it was any other Sunday. But nothing was the same. Their house no longer felt safe, or clean, or real. Everything had shifted. Every corner held a shadow. Every sound felt like a siren. When the mail came, Emily jumped. When a neighbor waved, Diane flinched. They were free, but they weren't, because they carried it now, in their bones, in their blood. The lie, the weight of him, of what they had done. They had buried him in the woods. But he wasn't gone. Not really. He lingered in their dreams, in their silence, in the air between them. And deep down, they both knew. Some things don't stay buried forever. It started with a knock on the door, just past noon on a Wednesday. Emily had just sat down with a cup of tea. Her hands still trembled when she held anything warm. Diane was in the garden, pulling weeds, pretending things were normal. The knock came again, louder. Emily froze. No one ever came to their door unannounced. Not since that night. She stood slowly. Her stomach tightened, peered through the peephole. 2 men, plain clothes, no uniforms, but the badges around their necks said enough. Detectives. Her heart dropped. She opened the door. One of the men stepped forward, polite but firm. Miss Holloway? Emily nodded. I'm Detective Reese. This is Detective Harmon. Mind if we come in for a few minutes? Emily's throat went dry. Sure, she said, stepping aside. Her voice didn't even sound like her own. They walked in, calm, professional, but their eyes scanned everything. Walls, floors, corners, looking for details, looking for cracks. Diane walked in through the back door, mud on her gloves. She saw them, stopped. The younger detective smiled. Mrs. Holloway. Diane nodded slowly. Yes. We're here about Alex Carter. That name, spoken aloud. It felt like a slap. Emily sat down on the couch, legs weak. Diane stayed standing. The detectives took out a small notebook. We understand Mr. Carter had been seeing your daughter for several weeks before he went missing. Emily nodded once. He came over here often? She swallowed. A few times. Do you recall when you last saw him? Emily looked at her mother. Diane spoke first. About 2 weeks ago. Maybe a little more. Did he seem off? Emily blinked. Off how? Stressed. Distracted. Like he was hiding something. Emily hesitated. I mean maybe. But nothing out of the ordinary. The detectives exchanged a glance. We're just trying to piece together his last known movements. Emily nodded. We found his car parked near Cypress Trail. Diane's jaw tightened. Emily forced a blank face. Is that where he lived? No, the detective said slowly. But his phone last pinged near your neighborhood. That made Emily's stomach twist. Detective Harmon leaned forward. Did Alex ever mention anything about health issues? Anything unusual? Emily kept her face still. No. The detective paused. Because we have reason to believe he may have been seriously ill. Emily's heart pounded in her ears. She looked at Diane, who stared at the floor. We're just trying to get a full picture, Harmon added. No one's in trouble. We're not accusing anyone. We just want to know more about the last people who saw him. Emily forced a nod. I wish we knew something. The men stood, handed over a card. If you remember anything, no matter how small, please call us. They left with quiet goodbyes. The door clicked shut, and the silence exploded. Emily turned to her mother. They found his car. Diane nodded. Emily's hands shook. They're getting closer. We stick to the story, Diane said. Nothing changes. But something already had. Because now they knew someone was looking. Someone cared. And that changed everything. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the questions in her head. What if they'd seen something? What if a neighbor had heard a noise that night? What if the soil in the woods wasn't deep enough? She got up around 2 a.m. Went outside. The moon was bright. Cold. She walked down the trail toward the clearing. Each step echoed in her head. She reached the spot. It looked untouched. Still. But she knelt anyway. Ran her hands across the ground. Pressed her palms to the earth. As if she could feel him beneath it. She stayed there a long time. Whispering apologies to the wind. Not because she forgave him, but because she couldn't forgive herself. When she returned to the house, Diane was waiting. You went there, she said. Emily didn't answer. Diane stepped closer. We can't go back. I know, but we can't go forward if we fall apart. Emily looked at her mother. Do you feel anything anymore? Diane hesitated. Yes, she said, but not what I used to. Emily nodded slowly. That made sense. They were different now. Changed. And not in a way that time could heal. The next day, Emily went to work for the first time in weeks. Tried to smile. To blend in. But people noticed. She was thinner. Paler. Quieter. Someone asked if she was okay. She lied. Of course. But it didn't feel like lying anymore. Just survival. That afternoon, she received an email. From a reporter. Subject. Inquiry about Alex Carter. She opened it. Short. To the point. We're doing a piece on missing persons in the area. Your name came up as someone close to Mr. Carter. Would you be willing to talk? Her hands trembled over the keys. Then she deleted it. That night, she told Diane. They're writing stories about him. Diane didn't respond right away. Then she said, let them. But her voice was thinner than usual. More tired. More afraid. The next week brought more knocks. Another detective. A different one. Asking different questions. More direct. Did Alex ever talk about past relationships? Did he have enemies? Did he ever talk about disappearing? Each time, the same answers. No, no, no. But it was getting harder to lie. Not because of the guilt, but because the walls were closing in. Emily began to notice small things. A parked car across the street for hours. A neighbor glancing too long. A figure in the woods, maybe, or maybe not. Her mind wasn't trustworthy anymore. The stress was turning it against her. And Diane wasn't doing much better. She jumped at the phone ringing. Forgot simple things. Once, she called Emily by the wrong name. It scared them both. The truth hadn't surfaced. But it was circling, waiting. And when it came, if it came, there would be no more hiding. Only judgment. Only consequence. Only the full weight of what they had done. And both of them knew. They weren't ready. Not yet. Maybe not ever. 6 months passed. The seasons changed. Leaves fell. Snow came. Then the thaw. Life outside moved forward. But inside that little house at the edge of the woods, time stood still. Emily and Diane didn't talk about him anymore. Not directly. But he lived in their routines. In the way they double-checked locks. In how they paused whenever the phone rang or a stranger walked by. No arrests. No more knocks. The case went cold. Public interest faded. The search ended quietly, without answers. But that didn't mean they were free. Because guilt has no expiration date. And shame doesn't forget. Emily kept working. She showed up. Smiled on cue. Laughed when she needed to. But inside, something had died. A piece of innocence. Of trust. Of the girl she used to be. Diane retreated further into herself. She started gardening again. Digging in the dirt somehow helped. Maybe because she'd already buried something else. Maybe because she was trying to grow something good to balance what had been done. They didn't heal. Not really. But they endured. Which, in its own way, was a kind of survival. One evening, they sat on the porch together. The sun was setting. Emily sipped tea. Diane watched the sky turn orange. Neither spoke for a long time. Then Diane whispered, "Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing?" Emily stared ahead. "I wonder every day." Silence again. Then Diane said, "But I don't regret stopping him." Emily nodded slowly. "He ruined us, and we stopped him from ruining anyone else." Diane looked at her daughter. "You saved me that night." Emily didn't answer, because some truths are too heavy for words, and some wounds never close. They just stop bleeding. The sun dipped behind the trees. Shadows stretched across the yard. Emily placed her hand gently over her mother's. It was the first time they'd touched in weeks. A small gesture, but it said everything. They were still here, still together, still trying. That had to count for something. Across the woods, an owl called out. Diane closed her eyes. Emily looked toward the trees, toward the place where the past was buried, the place that would always belong to him. But not completely, because the rest of their story wasn't his to own. It was still being written, day by day, choice by choice. Not clean, not easy, but real. And in that quiet, complicated truth, there was something close to peace. Maybe not forgiveness, but something like it. Some secrets live forever, but so does love. And sometimes, that's enough. Has love ever made you keep a secret? Let us know in the comments. If this story moved you, like and share. It might help someone going through something similar. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories where love, crime, and truth collide.